Hello, food enthusiasts, and welcome to another episode of the Future Foodcast. I'm Pam Linemiller, your host for today. And as always, we have thought leaders and innovators in the food space. And boy, are we going to have a great conversation today. I am so excited to talk to Jay Ashton. He is the National Brand Ambassador. Oh my goodness, it's a long title. National Brand Activation Manager for Sysco Canada. I had to write it down. Welcome to the podcast, Jay.
Thank you for having me. Awesome
Jay,
stuff.
Please explain to us what a National Brand Activation Manager does.
Great question, eh?
It's a great title.
It's a great title. My job is to build the brand of Sysco. So overall, what people think about Sysco, how we're perceived in the marketplace, what people think about us, how cool we are, our cool factor, if you want to call it that. I do that daily, is to really show the real true essence of who we are and who the people are that work within within our company and also within the overall industry itself. So we have great relationships. I work with associations from right across Canada. And then that was a big part of us building a media network, is to really share our love of the industry and our, influence and our support of the industry through our online media network that we've built as well over the last 3 years.
Yeah, and it's a lot, and we're going to talk about all the different avenues that you are involved in because it is a lot. And Sysco is a worldwide brand. It is a household name. I don't know anyone that hasn't heard of Sysco, and certainly anyone that's in the food space. So you really have a lot to work with there. You have a lot of partners that you work with and supply, and all kinds of restaurants. I mean, restaurants don't operate without Sysco, I don't think. And certainly that's part of what you're doing. But you do all kinds of interesting things too. I mean, you have a Sysco virtual kitchen, which is like the latest thing, right? That you did over the pandemic. Maybe we should start there, and we can expand into what else you've done. But tell us about SVK for short. Tell us about that in Canada.
So this is really interesting because I don't think any company's ever maybe ventured the way that we have into this whole new media network on social media and really sharing our love of the industry and our connections to the industry through this whole new platform. So we started on May 14th, 2020 I call it our COVID baby.
Yeah.
This is our COVID baby. We were really looking at ways, I was looking at ways of how we can bring the amount of content that we needed at that time to our industry, customer or not, but to the overall industry on what Sysco could do to help support these operators and the restaurateurs and the chefs that are in the industry with the resources that we had, but also with the experts that we knew or people we would have on a show to talk about what they could do to help. So we started it off. We really didn't know what we were doing that first year, and we just tried everything. We tried podcasts, we tried late night shows, we tried different things, and I think you have to do that when you start to introduce a new program or a new product. You kind of have to play around with it a little bit and test and have some fun with it. Yeah. So we did that for the first year, and then the second year we said, well, you know what? There's such a great way of looking at how other companies out there, like the Netflix of the world, the Amazon, Disney Plus, they've really created an empire in a way of creating a network where they support other people they contribute TV shows, documentaries, content to them in a manner that they become a network, a community. So I really started looking at that and say, you know what, there's so much content out there in the industry that we believe that we could build a network. So we started building a network. We started off with about 20 shows. Each show runs around 8 to 9 episodes per show. And we said, well, what if we do this a couple times a week? So we did that. And then the demand just started growing from there. It just became bigger and bigger as people started going, wow, this is really easy. We call it edutaining. So it's education and entertaining together. Yeah. So we have a little bit of fun, but at the same time, we really want to make sure people take something away from it. And a lot of restaurateurs at that time also were still dealing with COVID restrictions. There was a lot of things out there. We really weren't sure what was going to happen. So we started building in that way, and we started communicating to our industry through social, and that's through social video content. And then we came at the very end of this past past season. We call it seasons, just like season 1, season 2. This is season 3 for us right now that we're in.
Yeah.
But our second season, we finished off very strong of looking at the impact that we're getting out there. We're going to shows. People are starting to recognize us and at shows or talking about the different shows that they were watching or listening to. And we really saw it even take shape from there. So then we said, well, let's continue, obviously. And then we moved into a season 3. So speed all the way up to today. We currently have about 28 new shows on our network, and we have about 12 cooking shows. We have marketing shows. We have social media shows. We have everything that you need to learn in this industry with a show. We've partnered with the most amazing, I call them the best of the best, experts in the fields across Canada and the US to really allow them to help bring the content. So it's not a Sysco pitch. What we have, because we've got great resources as well, but it's out there to bring other people's experts and advice and ideas to the marketplace to share what they know.
Yeah, and you're just the person that's bringing all the resources together and providing them, but you've got all the different categories for anyone that wants to get involved in the restaurant space. The edutainment, they can look at those shows and be learning and figuring out what they might want to change in their own operations and how they might want to go about different processes and procedures. I mean, you're just providing information. It's kind of like that goodwill ambassador for the industry, really.
Yeah, we call it the Oprah model is what we call it.
Okay.
So we really think that I look at, and I've been in the industry, my 33rd year coming up in January of this industry. This is all I know. Yeah. And I've been from big restaurants to small restaurants. I've worked with Sysco 18 years now, almost 19 years.
Yeah.
And I've built the business resource department for Canada. That took a lot of my time up to COVID, that I was putting all my energy into helping restaurants in a one-on-one practice in our kitchens that we have across Canada and looking at that manner. And I still believe that there's obviously a need for that. Our teams do amazing things out there, but I really believe a lot of operators nowadays take a little bit from your suggestions or ideas. They take a little bit at a time. They only can consume so much. And we allow, on demand, we have some models where you can watch as much as you want, when you want, where you want. And that really hadn't happened before in our industry, where people were having to go to a webinar, or they were having to come in and go to a show, or go to a conference. Well, we don't necessarily have the luxury. A lot of people don't have the luxury of that, to be able to do that every day. So we said, well, let's be able to have it so they can watch it on their phone. A lot of people watch it on their home TVs on YouTube. Sure. They can listen to us or watch us on Spotify. They have both options on Spotify. And just take in as much as they want. They can watch 10 minutes, they can watch 20 minutes, they can do what they want. And that really hadn't been done before in our obviously in our space, to really look at what the consumer, or what the customer, or what the industry was willing to bear. And I think today you're seeing a lot of that. And I think you're continuously will see that as restaurants find it even more difficult with the inflation in many areas. Let's just cover that. Is that it'll be hard for them to leave their space, but they need to know about this stuff. And the way that we do it, we reach, thousands and thousands and thousands of people a day all over the US and Canada, and just bringing them a little bit of help. And hopefully they take one or two things from it. We don't usually in our shows, we don't usually get into really long, like a checklist you need to go through. We tackle, I usually say, about 2 things per show. I believe restaurateurs and chefs out there can usually take about 2 things. I've worked with thousands of restaurants over the years, consulting with them. They usually can handle 2. You give them 3, they're too busy for 3, but 2 is pretty easy to take. They'll do 1 and maybe 1 later. So I usually have our guests that do the shows with us really address 2 problems or 2 solutions, or 2 problems and 2 solutions. And that's as much as we take. I'd rather do more shows and make it simpler and easier for our listeners and our restaurateurs and chefs to be able to take something simple from that. So this is something new to our industry. We're paving. There's some interesting things about our show, if you want to get into that. So we are probably the first Fortune 50 company out there to ever do this. I think there's a couple copying me now. I'm not going to name them, but is all of our shows are live.
Okay.
They're 100% live. So no pre-recording, no editing. We do the shows live. And there's many reasons why, but I think the simplicity of it is that when you turn on a show, and I've done pre-recorded shows, I've done tons of those. I've done webinars, I've done all those things, is that you truly get a real, I guess, show, real content that you can't when you're doing a pre-recorded show than anything. And I believe there's a couple factors. One, I trust the content that we produce 100% that I will do it live. Obviously, we do some pre-show stuff, but we do it live. We have rundowns of the show, so we know what we're going to talk about. We obviously know what we're addressing. We know who's going to be.
You have a plan, but you're going to organically get there and share the points that you want to share, solve the problems you're going to solve.
Exactly.
I really like what you said about handling two things, because that's more consumable for people, not just restaurateurs, but regular people. I do love long form podcasts, but at the same time, I love that short and quick hit where I can hear what's happening and hear the problem and the solution. It's applicable to what I'm doing right now. Why are you laughing?
I just laugh because I try to do short, but sometimes they do turn into long.
Okay.
Because I love talking about this stuff. And it depends too, right? And so we do our shows live. We run commercials. We do our own commercials in a sense. We don't monetize the shows. We're not in the business of making money off media. We're in the business of helping our customers and helping our industry out, and that's really the simplicity of it. And we've got some great stuff lined up. We just signed I won't say what team, but we signed an executive chef of an NHL team last week. So we'll be producing a new series of behind the scenes of these big arenas across North America and what their chefs are going through, what they're offering in their expertise and stuff like that. So that, and then we've got some new shows coming up, but we have, we've partnered with some really just some amazing companies out there that really have the same kind of, DNA as we do to help people. And our guests are not professional actors or actresses. They're real people. And we had a quote quite a while ago, let's say about 6 months ago, someone said, you finally created the real Food Network.
Okay.
I truly believe that. Yeah, I truly.
And that's a compliment. That's a compliment for sure. Well, tell me some of the insights that you've gotten from all of these interviews. Well, first of all, let's back up, because you talked about the trajectory. I mean, the COVID baby happening, but it was perfect timing, really, and because then the trajectory of growth has been just crazy. And you were telling me you were just recognized as a personality. You can give me the details of that. The top 50.
Yeah.
You have all these titles, Jay.
I know I got a lot of, when you start going public more, I didn't know that this all stuff comes with it. No one told me that, which is, I'm flattered by it. But yeah, the top 50 brand ambassadors, personalities globally around the globe. So that's a huge list. There's a lot of smart people on that list, I tell you. So just to be honored to be a part of that group is huge. So that just started. And then we've been recognized as one of the top 5 restaurant podcasts in North America as well. And I would say in Canada, no one else is doing it like we do in Canada. And I tell you, it's also the thing, and I have to give a shout out to Sysco, just really to allow me to play in this space. And I always say this, and there's a few things I always say when people ask, so what do you, like, how'd you get there? How would you do? It really was just playing. We're having fun. And I know it sounds so simple when you say playing, but I remember I had one prof in university said to me, all the greatest art that is in all the galleries that millions of people look at every day was created by those artists just playing. And it wasn't like they intended to make those paintings that are worth millions of dollars and that we read about every day in the art world, or look in these big, beautiful books or on the internet. Those were made because those artists were playing. And I truly believe in that.
Yeah, it's the best of, and let's face it, the food space is very creative, right? The chefs, those that are actually in that creative space, and they probably love the whole concept of playing and trying to figure things out. That's what a creation is all about. But let's talk about some of the outcomes that you've seen, or some of the trends that you've seen from all the interviews that you've done. What's happening out there in the food space? I mean, we love technology here at the FutureFoodCast, because there's a lot going on in this space with technology. And you may not know, this this podcast is actually sponsored by Farm to Plate, which is a software blockchain platform. And so, we love to hear what's happening out there with technology, because we are technology, or that's where we come from. So what's
we can start there. There's a lot we
can
cover, because we do a show called the Restaurant Tech Show, and that's once a month, and we bring on different tech companies. I've got a co-host on the show, Chris from App8. And I tell you, when I look at the tech space, it's really sped up through COVID, I tell you. And a lot of these companies even started through COVID. But I see a lot of, obviously the ability to monitor your business on your phone, to monitor your business in many ways that maybe we haven't thought of before. I see that still from the trends that we're seeing. I still see that continuing to grow, to simplify, to get down. Back in the day when we were doing using technology and stuff like that, it was so complicated and the programs were so robust. Nowadays, they're simplifying them more and more every day, what's coming out there. So I see a lot of that coming into the space more and more as a simplification. Obviously, I see more and more people moving from third-party companies to, doing their own apps, their own delivery systems that way, just based on a lot on the cost factors. I do see a lot of, we partnered with a company called Spark Technologies, which I was a big part of, where we partnered with a robot company, where we see robots becoming a very big option out there in the marketplace, and also to create that a new experience for diners to enjoy. So that's a big part as well that I see continuing to grow, and actually grow in different spaces. So not just restaurants, but hotels. I'm trying to golf courses, those kind of things as well. So I see that space growing more and more. But I think the simplicity of is you have to be in the tech mindset in our industry nowadays to make a go of it. There's too much tech out there. AI is becoming really big right now. Right within the spaces. And this was something that we saw coming up over the last 10 years, was AI was starting to creep in more and more. I think that is going to be a big player moving forward. I think it came in and then we saw it pull back a little bit. And it might have been the fact that COVID, but it was a lot of our restaurant people, back to the 2 points, it was a lot of them to digest the complexity of AI to understand how that fit into their restaurants. You got to slowly drip it, right? So you got to drip that AI into our industry, and it's now moving in now more and more, but at a slower pace in a sense. And I think it's going to catch on extremely well. And I know fast food restaurants are using it already. So it's something that I think, and through COVID, I remember meeting with some companies out there that did sandwich signs, display sign, drive-through signs that use AI, and the technology's there. And I think we're going to see that just continue. I think it's going to be more, let's say, grassroots, connecting to more grassroots as opposed to more corporate identities right now. I think it's going to move into the grassroots right away.
Well, and I've interviewed some of them. So we have some of our episodes out there about AI, and it is really interesting. And not just in, the ordering or trying to, it's in predictive preparation.
Yes. Yeah.
To help minimize waste, to figure out, okay, what's happening in this town? Is there an event going on? Is it raining outside? Just what are all the variables that a human being isn't necessarily think about all that. And then just the visual piece of it, how full is this item? And of course, the robotics with the ordering or interfacing in fast food, that's been out there for a long time. So that really is. I've seen that happen, and I'm sure that you're talking to some very future thinking companies as well. Now, by grassroots, you mean kind of in the smaller niche of we're going to do this with our technology. Is that what you mean? And then it's going to be organically.
I think you're going to see it being more affordable to the restaurants that really can't afford maybe the AI content right now, or the systems that are in that place. I think it's going to become more affordable, and it's going to have to be. And you see this all the time, is they'll come in, they'll attach themselves to larger organizations out there, and then they'll get structured there and then move into more of the independents that are out there in the marketplace. And I think that's normal, but it is something that I do believe is a big space. I think there's a company that I partnered with as well called Oot. So OO, small t, Oot, and they do a show with us, and they're actually using AI in an advantage of recommendations based on reviews of restaurants in a live format.
Okay.
content. So if you go out there and you're recommending a restaurant on social, it's going to connect and actually share live feeds of that content, of that preference.
Okay.
So if a group of chefs go out and eat in a restaurant, obviously on the app, other people will know that those chefs are recommending that restaurant at that moment.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So there's a lot of,
Yeah.
it's really taking a lot of those systems that are today where you have to go back and you can read, through old reviews and old information.
Yeah.
This is in real time, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah. We're doing to see what's happening, word on the street. So
exactly. That's you're bang on. You're bang on to that. Yeah, this is exactly it. So
yeah.
I think
Very
those
cool.
kind of things. I think also is that the innovation, I think, is critical to move forward. And I think you're going to see this more and more, obviously in the food side, plant-based. I know a lot of companies out there watching the plant-based stocks and price go down. It is here to stay. And I know it's just going through one of those, as I learned through our network, you have your ups and downs. Those are just grander ups and downs. But I tell you that I don't want to promise it, but I do believe plant-based is just figuring itself out still. And it's going to take a while. But I think that because one, we have to move to that to sustain food. It's simple. And they're just figuring it out. And I think I'm a big believer. I'm wearing my hat today. Companies like Beyond Meat and Impossible and companies, and we have our own too. And I know that we'll get that. It's normal. It's normal. I created my own burger once for Canada with a company. Cool. And I know, like from burgers to media sites.
I know. You're just a jack of all trades. We haven't scratched the surface here.
Haven't got right into it, yeah. And it was the same thing. We were ahead of the curve, but those things kind of happen. And I think you have to kind of hold on for the long run, especially when you get to those new categories.
And what do you see? Like you've interviewed a lot of people. I know leadership is a key thing in the industry for you. Like talk a little bit about where your passion is with helping leadership, but what you see going on. I'm going to leave it open for you because
there we go. You want me to go on this one? This is a big one. One of my.
Well, let me interject once in a while, Jay. Take a breath every once in a while.
One of my favorite leadership coaches, and he's a good friend, is Matt Rolfe. And Matt and me have been working now for about a year almost on different projects that have been in the marketplace and things like that. Okay. He is one. I always call him, he's Canada's restaurant coach. I think he made a pull-up banner with my quote on it, but so I think there's coaches out there. And I think when I met Matt, and I remember calling him a consultant, he's like, Jay, I'm not a consultant, I'm a coach. I'm like, okay, whatever. Okay, kept calling it a consultant. He's like, no, I'm a coach. So now I know what a coach is. And I thought I was a coach for a longest time. But then I met Matt because I like I said, I worked with thousands of restaurants as I built the resource department for Canada, is that Matt has a heart of gold in a sense of what's right to help that restaurant. And he knows that how different everyone is, and he can handle that. And it's incredible. And I think when I look at leadership coaches out there in the place, is that Matt allows you, and I see this within the industry on leadership, Matt allows you to see where you need to be a better leader or be a leader through your own lens, if that makes any sense. But he doesn't go in there and tell you what you're not doing right or what you're doing wrong. Like he doesn't do that. He goes in there and he shows you what you need to do to be just a better leader. And he does it through the simplicity of his coaching and his books, all these different things. But he goes in there and he makes you feel so different to really look at what leadership means to you and what it means to your organization. And I think when I look at leadership overall in our industry, it needs a mat. It needs a shakeup, and it needs a mat. And I think the thing I say that is I've met with, like I said, so many leaders and owners and executive chefs over the years, is that you can't lead like you used to. And our president recently told us is that you have to learn, forget, and then relearn. And I think the same thing goes to when it comes to leadership within our industry. You got to forget, you got to relearn, and then learn that information again, because the industry right now, and I've been in this my whole life. Yeah. You can't lead the teams today like you did 10, 15 years ago. You just will not connect. They are so different. The industry has changed so much. There's sensitivity beyond levels. I was just watching a show, something online the other day about, forget his name. Anyways, he said that the chefs in the old days that glorified screaming in a kitchen and hollering at people.
Yeah.
That's not today. You can't do that today. And that shouldn't have done. We shouldn't have allowed it in the past either.
Right.
And today it is imperative that we don't repeat that. And you can't do that because it disrupted our industry and we thought it was very entertaining, more bad than good. And I believe Matt and those folks out there are helping people understand what's right and wrong as a coach, what the things you need to do to connect to your people. And today it needs to be what I think a thing in leadership is one is that you have to understand that you're a leader of your people, right? For your people. And that is so important that it's not about you. It's not one bit about you. And a lot of leaders in the old days was, look at me, I'm managing a big restaurant or this, these chain restaurant. Look at me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about that anymore. And I've led a huge team. We had about 80 people on my team before COVID. And they sure taught me what leadership was. And it wasn't about that. But in the old days, it was. Today, it's definitely not that. Today, it's all about leading through your others, supporting them. People are going through some crazy stuff right now in our industry. And mental illness is a big part of our shows. We do a lot on that. We did one yesterday. And that is something that we need to pay attention of. Talk is great. Conversations about it are great, but it needs now time to do something. And I started an organization, I think it was like 4 or 5 months ago, called the Staff Chair Project, where we want to help restaurants convert their staff rooms into spaces where people can go and just have a better moment in their day.
Huh. Well, that's interesting because that whole, I'll give you a break from talking so you can.
I can drink some water. Okay.
Yeah, maybe. With even people to people, but certainly as leaders, just being a good listener so that you can empathize with where your employees are. You said there's so much going on and people are going through so many different things, but if you aren't paying attention to what's happening out with your team, it's going to be over your head if all you're looking at is the P&L and the bottom line numbers and the efficiencies and whatever other analytics you might be looking at and missing the people side of it. Then you're going to lose the people side of it. You're going to lose your good people.
You're so right. And I think that's what I think Gary Vee said it is that if you have good culture, you'll have good results in sales. Right. And I truly believe the same thing in our industry. If you have a good culture in your restaurant, guess what? You're going to have a good restaurant.
And everybody's trying to figure out how to have a good culture, Jay. And I'm hearing from you that a big piece of that is you've got to be with your people. You got to be paying attention to them, listening to them, and connecting with them on a different level now than used to be before. It's not about you walking in with a big title or accolades behind your name and saying, I'm so-and-so, so you need to listen to me and execute. That's not working anymore. That's what I just heard you say.
No, you know what? So it's interesting to say that because also I do that within the shows. I don't talk about myself in the shows. I don't talk about Sysco even on the shows. It's all about the guest and the topic and the industry. Right. It's not about, I'm this and that. I don't do that. And you see that a lot. And you see that even in presentations today is like, look at me, I've accomplished this, I've done this and all. You got to put this stuff away. People right now tone out on that stuff. And I think it's so interesting that you said that because I do the same thing every day. Is I make a conscious effort not to talk about myself on the shows. So it's kind of weird talking about this on you with you.
I know. So here I am making you talk about yourself, but
that's okay.
It's our show, not
your show. It's your
that's
show.
Why you're here.
Yeah, right. But that's why I think it's so important as we see podcasts out there is that I think the success of podcasts, and I know one of my good friends, Roger, that has Restaurant Rockstar, he does the same thing. He talks. He's not doing it for the money and he's not doing it for the accolades. He's doing it to help the industry. And he's always said that to me. And I love him to death because that's what he does. And he helps the industry. And I think you'll have success with not only your business, your podcast, or whatever you do. If we stop talking about ourselves and start listening and start helping others. And I know it's a cliche thing to say, but I truly believe it. I've seen it, I live it every day. It's not about the accolades that you have. It's about what you can do. And I tell you, we do that every day. We have rules in our network and a lot of them people are scratching their head going, what? And I said, well, that's how we're going to connect. And that's how people will relate to the content that we're producing and what we're doing out there. But I think, and that's why we started the mental illness campaign, because I kept having these amazing shows, but nothing was happening. I didn't see anything happening. No physical thing was happening. So, well, let's start this project where we can change staff rooms. And there was a location in Washington that had done this.
Okay.
And I paid homage. I said, this is probably the best idea I've seen in like the last 10 years, where they transformed their staff room into a wellness room.
Oh,
And I said, with the amount of people that we reach on our network and how we can influence the industry in Canada through our shows, is that let's make it a new way of looking at those rooms now, and those
yeah.
staff rooms and those places, to be a place where we can make a safe place for our staff and our people to just have a moment. It doesn't take much sometimes, a moment just to be away from the world and away from work in our work, right? So
yeah, literally
right?
a step out.
Yeah.
What would you say is important to have, just for our listeners that might be interested in that? What would you say is important to have in, as they think about changing a staff room? What are one or two or three things that would be good for them to think about?
I think you got to make it look good. It's not the graveyard of the restaurant.
Not like all the trash, all the
Exactly
piled up where people have had their lunch.
Broken chair. Yeah. It's not the broken chair space. It's not the old booth I used to have 40 years ago.
Right.
It's not those places, right? So I think those are what we have to realize, that this is a space that you want. And it's good. And Matt said this to me, and Matt wants to put all his books in these rooms too, is that he said, it'll cause a movement that maybe they won't work with you on creating these spaces, but they may take and re-look at those spaces. And maybe it's something that they can physically do in those spaces just to make them a little bit better for their staff. So I vision these rooms to not be a graveyard of the old equipment and the oil pails and the milk,
the broken stuff. Yeah,
exactly. And all those things, that it's a place that references the owner's thought on what a good place is that they'd want to sit in and relax for a few minutes. Because you think of how, and if you think about this, and I've seen people sleep in staff rooms because they had a 3-hour shift or break until their next shift.
Sure.
I've seen people read books in there. I've seen people study in there. It needs to be a place of your business that you need to be maybe looked at a little bit different than the past, and invested in a little bit. It doesn't cost a lot to invest in that space,
right,
and to, put a better, maybe a better couch in there, better chairs in there. Maybe it needs, an audio sense or something like that makes it sound like a relaxing place to go to.
well, music.
And Matt said this, he goes, this will help with the retention.
Well, I was going to say it will. The people will then stay and hang around, and instead of going down the street on their break or, the place next door, they might actually stay on location and take their break and feel like they can relax there. And
exactly. Yeah.
Because the restaurant business is a little crazy. I mean, I grew, a lot of us have worked in the restaurant business. My first job was in the restaurant business and worked as a waitress and all of that. And it's intense when it's intense. And
do you remember like the stress that comes some of those days, or just like,
yeah, I mean, and the days are sometimes long, and the shifts are long, and depending on, what the workflow, the flow of the patrons is, it's just variable. So, when COVID started to lift a little bit and we were going back out to restaurants, and I think my husband and I went out for an anniversary dinner, and we gave almost as much tip as we paid for the dinner, because the guys were starving, like they hadn't had any work. You're thinking, I'm happy to be here and we're celebrating and you're serving us, and we're going to give you, extra tip. We can do that, and we want to do that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's all. Just
the one thing I want to mention on that, because you're 100% right, and I love hearing those stories, is that think about the person that is taking care of you that day. And I think this goes out to all restaurant people out there. What does that DNA look like of that person that just went through, a horrific last 3 years or 2 years, still want to do that profession or that job, still come with a smile on their face? The amount of stuff that they have behind them that we don't see going on in their lives is got to be enormous. And these people still show up and they still pump out amazing service and they do amazing stuff. I always think of what's behind the curtain or what's behind them. And I guarantee it is not what we maybe even think it is. It's probably 10 times worse.
Well, and that's a great heads up for our listeners too, Jay, as a reminder, because now a lot of things are open. People are traveling, so much so that I think the airports are crazy because they got overwhelmed faster than they thought they would. I imagine this holiday travel season is going to be a little bit frenetic, and just being kind goes a long way. It could be any kind of serving person that hasn't been working during COVID. It could be that taxi cab driver, the Uber or Lyft, or the person in the airport that's checking you in with your ticket. To your point, mental health and all the service providers. It's outside of the restaurant industry. It's a lot in the restaurant industry, but the service goes outside of that too.
I think we have to look at that, because I think that what I've seen, because I get into, and I don't get deep into these people's worlds, but I get to know them, and I get, we have a pre-show and after show, and I get to chat with all these amazing people, and I hear the stories of what's going on behind them. I've had big celebrities to independent operators in the middle of nowhere, and they all are just amazing. But to hear the stories of what they're dealing with, or, they'll tell me, yeah, no staff showed up today. And we don't talk about it. It's not the topic of the show, but they're like, yeah, we had no staff today, and I had to work 14 hours or something, this and that, or I had to do this at home today because my kid had this or that. And I'm like, wow, the amount of stuff that we don't, like, we only see like one layer. There's millions of things going on behind these people. Yeah. And I tell you, we need to think about that as not only when we visit a restaurant, but when we run a restaurant, we work with these amazing people, is these chefs, especially chefs. Mm-hmm. I work with a lot of chefs. They're going through some amazing stuff at home. That is tough. Yeah. And I don't know if I've ever met a chef that it's like, oh, it's perfect world. It's great. It's rainbows and unicorns. They're going through some serious stuff. So I think we need to pay respect and pay homage to those folks, because they're doing incredible work out there, and it's not easy. It's and here's the thing that also, that I don't say beefs me a little bit, but bugs me a little bit, is that all these, and I'm going to say this on behalf of all podcasters for our industry and the folks out there, is that, I'm going to say this, I'm going to get in trouble, is that we have to realize what these people are living, and we cannot create content without being out there. And I know some podcasters out there, from Matt Plapp to Roger to what Matt talks about all the time, and these folks out there in our space and providing advice. And the folks that I know, and there's a group of us that we, even what Sean from Kelly Barbecue, I just did some stuff with him. He's on my show a few days ago. These folks live and breathe the industry. Mm-hmm. If you're not doing that, and you sit in a room all day without being out there, and you're providing advice, you got to check that, because you can't provide good direction or information or content sitting in your office and not being out there and sitting down and listening to these people's stories, or having a coffee with them, or just spending a few minutes with them. One, you can't create good advice. Absolutely can't create good marketing. If you try to market out of an office to the industry, you're going to lose. I promise you. Yeah,
totally out of touch. But you are totally in touch, because you're out there and you're talking to all these people all the time, which is, the insight that you've been able to share with us today is really critical and unique, because you're the only one that does what you're doing right now, like you're doing it. So thank you for being with us on that. But you mentioned about creating marketing content, and I don't want to leave our time together without talking about
one of my favorite subjects.
Because that's what, kind of the future of how we're going to, share about what's going on. And go ahead, Jay. I don't need to.
You want to get into this?
I don't need a well-formed question.
This is one of my passions. I've been a marketing guy from day one, and that's what I love, the fact that I get to play in this space, and I work on our corporate marketing team, and we have amazing people on our team as well. But I do believe this is where my strengths are. It's I just happen to work in the industry, and this is my marketing strengths, is that I have a creative mind, innovative mind that comes to this space. But I think when you look at the simplicity of content or creating marketing for the restaurateurs out there, and Sean Wolchef, that was on my show, from Kelly Barbecue, he says, we all have the tools in our hands. We all have our phones. You don't need fanciness. And we're all can just be ourselves within creating the content. So just being authentic. So when you take those things and you look at it, and Sean's got a theory that it's about consistency, quantity, speed equals quality when you create social content for marketing in your restaurants. Don't worry. And you see this every day. Don't worry if it's not perfect. A lot of people work to the perfection of a video. That's not the case. People get lost in that, and then you won't produce the amount of quantity you need to create content on social. What I believe within that, when you look at the marketing that you need or the direction, or what do you focus on with the marketing? Market your people, make sure it's authentic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't script it. I promise you don't script it. I see it every day. People say, oh, you lose them, right? Enjoy yourselves, have fun, show the beauty of what you're doing, what your restaurant's about, the food that you do, be proud of it, but be 100% authentic.
Just that organic sharing.
It is. And we see it every day. We see what we wonder why. We'll see someone on a social platform that gets millions of views, and it wasn't planned out, as more or less by accident.
Right.
We like that authentic. We relate.
They're
to
surprised.
it.
Yeah.
And marketing is moving more and more into authentic content creation. And don't spend money. I would say don't spend like I know it, but I would recommend watching what you spend on stagnant advertising, but more get into video advertising or using video to create the content out there. It's so much power. I see the statistics in the back end of the systems we use. The statistics is incredible. So when you use video based and you share things within video based, it changes the world. And if you can do it, do it. That's the way I have the theory. If you can, it's kind of like when we did live versus pre-recorded shows. Someone said, well, why would you do it? I said, well, we can do it. We can do it live. Why don't we do it then? And then, right. Then it's like, okay, well, I guess you're right. Same kind of thing is like, if you can do video based versus an advertisement of, let's say, a special or something you're offering, new menu, do video instead. It will cost you next to nothing, if not nothing. And it will have more impact than if you do a fancy ad. I promise.
Golden piece of advice.
Yeah, it really
is. Listeners out there.
There you go. That's from the bazillions of shows we've done over the years.
Bazillions of shows. But that's so important. Done is better than perfect. And I tell myself all that.
Oh, I love that.
I tell myself all the time, but it still doesn't always help me fight the need to make it better, because it's going to live forever out there. And I always think about that. But then I'm like, maybe. That's okay. But your live show point made me think about, what's the favorite part of, when you watch a series or a movie. I think I saw out there, like, they have these Friends bloopers from the Friends series that was really popular. I don't know how many millions of hits the Friends mess ups got that didn't even make it to the show. Everybody's wanting to watch those. To your point about doing live, they get the bloopers right in the original show, because it is what it is and what's happening. So it's it's kind of fun. Yeah, I can imagine you have a great time with that.
Oh, yes, I do. Yeah.
Before we go today, what else would you like to share with our audience?
I think the last thing is, as we go into this new year, and I'm not sure when this will play, but when we go into 2023, I think when you look at operators today, and if I could provide any advice on interviewing hundreds and hundreds of people over the last few years, you have to put in your business plan or your restaurant plan of innovation, reinventing, learning, and relearning is a key of your DNA. It needs to be a part of your DNA as you move forward. You need to set up time. I had a meeting today with one of our guys I'm going to Vancouver with tomorrow or next week to do a show out there. And I said to him, restaurateurs love lists. We write lists down on what we need to order. We do menus in a list format. If you look at a menu, it's a list, right? Everything's a list. So we need to create action plans within a list. If we don't do that, we get too busy and we're all over doing stuff. So we need to create simplicity of creating things and putting it into a list and checking them off. But you need to look at like a strategy and plan. You need to reflect on, you need to reflect on what you're doing right. Because a lot of people look at what you're doing wrong. Everyone wants to tell you what you're doing wrong, especially on podcasts. Everyone's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? You do this, do that, do this. Look at what you're doing right? And you may have a few things you need to tweak. But I think most restaurants today that are here today through the last 3 years, you're probably doing 99% of the things right already, right? Because you survived through these 3 years. Congratulations. You're probably doing things right.
Yeah. Something's
Can you
good.
make more money? Possibly. Everyone always can say that, but probably doing things right. So I would just suggest, moving forward through this 2023, we know inflation, we know labor. We know all these things that we've been talking about over the last 6 months. They're going to be tougher, but I think we know that you can make it. It's easy. We just made it through the worst 3 years of the history of our industry. But I think when you look at moving forward, you need to always be looking at innovation. The general public is going to always be looking for something new. And what's nice about that, it allows you for pricing and adjustments on your menu and all these different things. But always keep the ball forward, moving forward. Don't get complacent. It's pretty simple business strategies out there, but you have to always move forward. You have to look at innovation. You have to look like the AI we're talking about today. Look at what's new in the marketing place. Look at what's happening on social. Be tied to the industry, but always be innovating. And it could be dishes to the way you handle your staff, to the way you do your staff room, all these different things. Innovate is going to be key. And that's nice because people are attracted to creative people. Creative people change the world, by the way.
Oh, there you go. And that's a great ending line, Jay. Well, thank you for that last bit of wisdom about innovation. I think that certainly our listeners can take that away in their restaurant space or anywhere they're working in the food space. And I really appreciate you being on the podcast with us, Jay. I have a special shout out to our sponsor, Farm to Plate. They are creating the future of food ecosystem today. You can go to farmtoplate.io to check that out. But thanks again, Jay, for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Future Foodcast. Future Foodcast is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.